Hey everybody, been getting asked this question, or a similar question, quite a bit, so I figured I'd make a video on it. About sleeping mats. Do I use them? What do I recommend? So on and so forth. Now, if you asked me this question a couple of years ago, I'd have been like, sleeping mat? Ridiculous! The earth is your sleeping mat! But parts of the earth are real lumpy and sharp and wet, pretty uncomfortable. And then after I did my Knowles course, they forced us to use a sleeping mat, and they're not bad. They're actually kind of rad. So I've got a couple of popular sleeping mats. Well, one of them, Thermarest, very popular sleeping mat, and its arguably superior generic counterpart, Multimat. I've had good luck field testing both of these mats. I've taken these to Mount Mitchell, the highest peak in the Appalachian Trail, Alaska, Japan, Morocco. They've both stood their rigors. So I'm going to review these, compare and contrast, talk about the different types of mats at the end. These are both blow-up mats. There's also solid-state mats, and, you know, solid rolls versus accordion style and all that. So we'll get into that at the end. But for now, we're just going to review, compare, and contrast these two using some simple metrics, namely size. How much does it take up space-wise in your gear? Weight. How much added weight does it have? How much time does it take to blow up and deflate? And then, of course, how much money do these things cost? Because money is a thing that I notoriously don't have, so I tend to prefer cheaper gear, as long as it's efficient. Alright, so first off is the Thermarest. I should have model numbers subtitled down here or whatever. But first we're just going to talk about in its compressed form and its compression sack. This Thermarest mat weighs in at 809 grams, or 1 pound, 12.5 ounces. Just 3.5 ounces shy of being 2 solid pounds. It's 11 inches long, and it's got a 6.5 inch diameter. So it takes up quite a fair bit of space. Now by contrast, the Multimat. The Multimat weighs in at 483 grams, or 1 pound, 1 ounce. So about half the weight of the Thermarest. Measures in at 10 inches long and a 3-inch diameter. So an inch shorter in length and half the girth of the Thermarest. So it takes up much less space and is actually fairly squishy. Whereas the Thermarest is pretty unyielding once it gets compressed down. This still has a little room to play. Also, while they both come with compression sacks, the Multimat comes with a repair toolkit. So it's got stuff for fixing punctures and things like that. Alright, so now we're going to talk about the number of breaths it takes to blow these things up / time, and the size that they are once they're fully inflated. You'll notice, as I said before, the Multimat comes with a repair kit inside of it, so you've got a little sealer, little sealant, and some patches you can use on this thing. Alright, so unfold this thing. Alright, so we got Multimat Airlight 22193. MultimatUSA.com, that's where you can get these. Alright, so you unfold it, twist open this thing, where the breath goes in, make sure the other one is sealed, obviously, and then start blowing. So there you go. 26 full breaths later, you have a completely inflated Multimat. You can see that it's quite thick. I'll have the measurements on the end card when we go comparison to comparison. But it's quite thick, pretty solid. It's not as wide as many broad human beings, but it's wide enough for me. I'm a 5'9" dude with broad-ish shoulders, so it suits my needs just fine. I have so much comfort. Alright, so it's 18 inches wide, 72 inches long, and 3 inches deep? Width? I don't know. It's 3 inches, so it's not too bad. It keeps you off the ground and insulated pretty well. Next up, how long does it take to take the air out of this thing? Open both nozzles, Listen to that loud air. Once it's seeped out naturally, you just begin to walk from one end to the other. And then you just slip it back into its compression sack. It's just that easy. Next up, the Thermarest Traillight. Here, take it out of its compression sack. You can see that it really doesn't have any more compressing than it could possibly do. Ugh. Take that out, unroll it. The Multimat is the pool toy type construction. This has chambers, so theoretically it should take less breaths and less time to inflate. So here we go. 13 breaths. 13 breaths to inflate this thing. And however much time that is. You can also see that this Thermarest is tapered at the end. It's mummy style. So you can put it in your horribly confining mummy style sleeping bag if you prefer. I don't. 71 inches long, so slightly longer than the Multimat. At its apex, 20.5 inches wide. And while only 1.5 inches, half as much girth off the ground, it's denser, so you don't feel that you're any closer to the ground, whereas the Multimat has quite a bit of give, so it needs that doubled girth. I'm laying on this backwards. Now the deflate. Open the nozzle, you can hear the air escape. There you go. Much faster to deflate and roll up, but way more difficult to get back into its stuff sack. So, Thermarest, Multimat, both come with compression sacks and their respective mats. The Thermarest is potentially made of a more solid construction, so it might not puncture as easily over time. They both stood out pretty well, so performance-wise, they're about equal. Cost-wise, Thermarest is more, takes up more space, weighs more, but on the other hand, it's made of possibly a sturdier construction. It feels sturdier, so it might not pop on you, although I've never had it pop on me. The Multimat, cheaper, smaller, lighter, comes with a repair kit inside of its compression sack, complimentary. It might puncture easier, though it hasn't punctured on me yet, and I've been pretty rough on it. It does take a fair amount of breaths to inflate, and a little bit longer to deflate. Also, it's louder, just while you're inflating and deflating it. So, I mean, if you're on a time-sensitive, silent recon mission, maybe this is the way to go, though. If you're really on a time-sensitive recon mission, you probably don't have the luxury of fancy sleeping mats anyway. But in case. Now, I don't think it's really necessary to cover why you would want to sleep on a sleeping mat. It sucks sleeping on sharp, pointy things, wet, gross ground, and also the ground just leaches heat from your body, so if you're in a semi-survival situation, it behooves you to be off the ground as much as possible. Now that we've talked about why you want a sleeping mat, your next question is, well, what type of sleeping mat do you want? So you've got your solid-state construction, which comes in a big roll, and an accordion-style construction. Obviously, the benefits to those are they can't possibly puncture because there's nothing, or they can't deflate when they're punctured because there's nothing to deflate. They are a solid piece. The downside is, of course, that they take up a ton of space and never get smaller. On the plus side, though, you can rip them apart and use them to field repair your gear, which I have done, and they work magnificently. I used a foam roll type. The accordion type takes up less space and is can be lighter and sturdier than the roll type, but it's really an individual choice thing. As far as the inflated sleeping mats go. Got a couple options. You've got the kind that have lots of individual chambers and cells that hold air and facilitate the transfer, so they inflate quickly, they deflate quickly, they're more resistant to puncture. They're typically more expensive, and they take up more space than the other kind, even when they're deflated. The other kind being types that are basically a slightly sturdier pool raft. So you just deflate them, and they're nice and small, and then you blow into them, and it takes a ton of breaths to inflate them, and they can puncture easier. The benefits to inflatable types, they take up less space, they're lighter, and you can use them to float on if you need to float across something, provided there's no punctures in your mat. So me personally, I prefer less space, less weight over arguable comfort. I'm comfortable, well, I'm as comfortable as I get pretty much all the time, so it doesn't bother me any to have this sort of a mat. So I prefer the smallest, cheapest, lightest thing that I can have that will still get the job done. So in my opinion, the Multimat is the sleeping mat of choice, until I find a lighter, cheaper solution that's not just sleeping on the ground. That's cheating. That's beyond the scope of this video. Also, the solid state sleeping mats hold up in way more extreme temperature conditions, since air and pressure temperature can have an effect on things that inflate and deflate. If something doesn't have to worry about those things, then you can take them in much more inhospitable environments. But as long as you're not going to one of those places, foreseeably, inflatable multimat or something similar is the way to go. Hope this video helped. If you have any questions, comments, I guess, hit me up. Nash out.